Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go over my review of Summerslam 1990. Starting off the evening, we go to our first match of the night. It is the Rockers versus Power and Glory. Again, it was a good matchup, back and forth matchup between both teams, with the Rockers keeping the pace of the match. The Power and Glory ultimately hit the finish on the Rockers, pinned them for the three, and your winners of the match are Power and Glory. Couple things I'll say about this match is, number one, this was a great opening matchup for SummerSlam 1990 and the Rockers. Even though they didn't get the win in this matchup, I feel like a lot of teams that a lot of people grew up watching, such as the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, just to name a few, kind of had to pay homage to the Rockers, man, because the move sets that both Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels were doing in their prime as a tag team, we started to see that, as years went on with teams like I just mentioned, the Hardy Boys and Edge and Christian. And I thought they did a phenomenal performance in this match, man. Even though Power and Glory got the win, I thought the Rockers did a phenomenal job. But hats off to Power and Glory for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Texas Tornado versus Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental Championship. Again, this was a great matchup, back and forth matchup between both Texas Tornado and Mr. Perfect, with the Tornado keeping the pace of the match. And Texas Tornado ultimately applies a claw on Mr. Perfect, pins him for the three, and your winner of the match, and new at that time Intercontinental Champion, is the Texas Tornado. Again, man, fantastic matchup. Really. I mean, Mr. Perfect, and I mentioned this multiple times in the past, Mr. Perfect was one of those wrestlers, man, that I really feel like didn't get a fair shake in professional wrestling, in my honest opinion. Severely underrated, to a point where I felt like he would have been a perfect World Heavyweight Champion, whether it was for WCW, whether it was for WWE. Mr. Perfect was the embodiment of what a pro wrestler is, man. The promos that he would cut were fantastic. His in-ring ability, his athleticism was just perfect. And then him being managed even by Bobby the Brain Heenan. I guess you can assume being managed by Ravishing Rick Rude. He's just a perfect wrestler, man. Hence the name. I mean, it's just, he deserved to be World Heavyweight Champion and just never got his fair shake in being a World Heavyweight Champion. And to me, severely underrated. Probably one of the best Intercontinental Champions that we've seen all time. Hands down. And Texas Tornado, if you guys don't know who that is, it's Kerry Von Erich. Rest in peace to Kerry Von Erich and Mr. Perfect as well. But a lot of people probably got that confused on who Texas Tornado really was. It was Kerry Von Erich. Again, it was great to see this matchup. Again, both these guys really beat the hell out of one another. But again, hats off to the Texas Tornado for getting the win in this matchup, and at that time becoming the new Intercontinental Champion. Moving on from that, we go into our next match on the card. It is Queen Sherry versus Sapphire. This match actually did not happen. I mean, it happened, but Sapphire never really showed up in this matchup. So this match was a no contest, and your winner of the match was Sherry. I kind of assumed that Sapphire wasn't going to come out to the ring, because Sapphire was more of a, I wouldn't even say valet. It was something that, there was a little bit of chemistry between Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire. And Sapphire was more of a fan of the show, at least the way they were presenting her with Dusty Rhodes. And she would kind of walk to the ring with Dusty. But she didn't show up for this match. And the whole storyline throughout this night was that nobody, including Dusty, could find where Sapphire was the entire night. So I kind of knew that she was not going to show up for this match. But hats off to Sherry for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go to our next match of the night. It is the Warlord versus Tito Santana. Again, I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup at first, with Warlord keeping the pace of the match. And ultimately, Warlord hits the devastating power slam on Tito Santana, pins him for the three, and your winner of the match is the Warlord. Again, hats off to Warlord for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next scheduled match of the night. It is Demolition versus the Hart Foundation in a 2 out of 3 falls tag team championship match. I thought it was a great matchup, back and forth matchup between both teams, with Demolition keeping the pace of the match, but the Hart Foundation ultimately get the win in this matchup. A couple of things I'll say about this match is, number one, the tag team division that WWF had at the time. Demolition was a fantastic tag team, Axe and Smash, phenomenal tag team, and the Hart Foundation, man. I mean, the Hart Foundation, to me, is a definition of a tag team, man. Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Bret the Hitman Hart, obviously, kind of somewhat being related. with Jim Neidhart being the brother-in-law of Bret Hart, and just what the Hart Foundation brought to professional wrestling. I mean, Bret Hart to me is a wrestler's wrestler. Always has been, always will be, and the best of the best. You know, there's a lot of dream scenario matches that I would have loved to see Bret Hart have. Number one being Kurt Angle. I thought Kurt Angle versus Bret Hart would have been fantastic. Daniel Bryan versus Bret Hart would have been awesome. Absolutely awesome. I'm not sitting here saying Daniel Bryan is exactly on the same level as Bret Hart, but he's right below that, man, literally. Again, you know, WWE back in the day, man, had a really strong lineup for tag teams. And as of late, what you see on Monday Night Raw, SmackDown, is just not the same. And I wish they would go back to that and have better tag teams, because tag team wrestling is in, man. If you look at AEW's product and the amount of tag teams they have on that roster and the amount of tag matches they have, and just the match they had it all out between the Lucha Bros versus the Young Bucks, that right there should show you and should tell you how much tag team wrestling means to professional wrestling. And we just don't have that anymore in the main roster. And again, it's crazy because you have matches between Demolition and the Hart Foundation that we once had in WWE, and we just don't have that same kind of tag team action that we get from back then now in the main roster. It's crazy. But hats off to the Hart Foundation for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is Jake the Snake Roberts versus Bad News Brown. I thought this was a good matchup, back and forth matchup between Jake Roberts and Bad News Brown, with Jake Roberts keeping the pace, but Jake ultimately gets the win by disqualification. Again, really good matchup. I just wish this match was a clean finish. And again, not a lot of people give credit to Bad News Brown, man. Bad News Brown was a decent wrestler. You know, some people didn't like him. You know, some people hated him. Some people, you know, maybe very few liked Bad News Brown. I didn't mind Bad News Brown, man. I think Bad News Brown, you know, obviously was a heel wrestler. Not a lot of people liked him. And he obviously associated himself with other heels in professional wrestling, but I feel like he never really got a fair shake either. You know, he could have been multi-time Intercontinental Champion or Tag Team Champion. He just never really got his fair shake in professional wrestling. So, again, hats off to Jake the Snake Roberts for getting the win in this matchup. I just wish it was a clean finish. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Jim Duggan and Nikolai Volkov versus the Orient Express. I thought this match was okay. It was a back-and-forth matchup at first between both teams, with Duggan and Volkov keeping the pace. But Duggan ultimately hits a devastating clothesline, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Jim Duggan and Nikolai Volkov. Hats off to Jim Duggan and Nikolai Volkov for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Randy Savage versus Dusty Rhodes. Before this match even got started, you see Ted DiBiase and Virgil. You know, back in the day, if you ever watched pay-per-views from the early WWE days, they always kind of had like this stage structure in the beginning of, you know, where the walkout was. So you had Ted DiBiase and Virgil on the microphone, well, especially Ted DiBiase, talking about, you know, money could buy anything. And he pretty much bought the services, if you will, of Sapphire. This entire time that Dusty was looking for Sapphire throughout the entire night of SummerSlam, couldn't find her. Well, come to find out, she was actually associating herself with Ted DiBiase and Virgil, which kind of threw Dusty Rhodes off. Randy Savage quickly attacks Dusty with Randy, hitting Dusty with some kind of bag. Referee was distracted, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Randy Savage. Again, it was a good matchup. I kind of wish it was a clean finish, that, you know, we didn't have Randy use some kind of bag to hit Dusty Rhodes and the referee being distracted, because I'm a big fan of both, man. I'm a big fan of Randy Savage. Humongous fan of Randy Savage, man. I think there will never be another wrestler out in the world like a Randy Savage, nor Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes, again, a big fan of him. Without Dusty's mindset in professional wrestling, we would have the events such as Starrcade and the Great American Bash. And the way he used to book matches and book events, man, I mean, star-studded events, absolutely. So I just wish it was a clean finish. And a lot of people used to knock Dusty when he got into WWE because of the whole polka dot gimmick. But Dusty pulled it off. Dusty didn't care about that stuff, man, in my honest opinion. I think Dusty cared about the fans and cared about putting on a good performance and a great match for the fans. And some people thought it was some kind of poke towards Dusty Rhodes because he came over from WCW over into WWE, and obviously Vince McMahon taking over WWE and so on and so forth. But Dusty pulled it off, man, and the fans still love Dusty Rhodes. You know, he was the American dream, and he lived the embodiment of that, hands down. So, again, hats off to Randy Savage for getting the win in this match. I just wish it was a clean finish. Moving on from that, we go to our next match of the night. it is Earthquake versus Hulk Hogan. Again, I thought this was a good matchup, back and forth matchup between both Earthquake and Hogan. Earthquake was keeping the pace of the match, but Hogan hits a leg drop on Earthquake. Jimmy Hart then attacks Hogan, and then Hogan ultimately hits a body slam on Earthquake, pins, and your winner of the match by countout because Hogan ended up hitting a body slam on Earthquake on the outside on a table, but the table did not break. Referee does a 10 count, and your winner of the match by countout is Hulk Hogan. A couple things I'll say about this match. Number one, Earthquake. Man, Earthquake, they were really hyping up Earthquake to be this indestructible force at this time. And honestly, I'm not going to sit here and say I was against it. Obviously, I prefer Earthquake teaming up with Typhoon being the natural disasters. I thought that was a phenomenal tag team, and those guys, every time they got in the match together, they beat the hell out of you. Those guys were units, man. The guys were huge. Hogan, obviously, a lot of the flagship of WWE at that time was on Hogan's back, and I would add Randy Savage to that as well. But Hogan was the main flag bearer of WWE at the time. Everybody wanted to see what Hulk Hogan was going to do, and everybody was invested into Hulk Hogan. No matter what you were doing, even if you're not a wrestling fan, you know exactly who Hulk Hogan is and what he's about. So a lot of the matches that Hogan had, they had Hogan going over, but throughout this match, Hogan was kind of putting over Earthquake to be that indestructible force. And I thought Earthquake did a phenomenal job in this matchup. But again, hats off to Hogan for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of SummerSlam 1990. It is Rick Rude versus the Ultimate Warrior for the WWE World Championship. Again, this was a good matchup, back and forth matchup between both Rick Rude and the Ultimate Warrior, with Warrior keeping the pace of the match. The Warrior ultimately hits a press slam on Rick Rude in the middle of the ring. Warrior then climbs the top of the cage, goes over the cage, feet hit the floor, and your winner of the match, and at that time still WWE World Champion, is the Ultimate Warrior. Again, fantastic closing matchup for SummerSlam 1990. And then my thing too, and this kind of reiterates what I said about Kurt Hennig. Rick Rude, fantastic heel. I don't think there'll ever be another wrestler like Rick Rude. God rest his soul. But Rick Rude, again, could have been multi-time world champion. Could have been, hands down. And, yes, he was Intercontinental Champion. I believe he was even Tag Team Champion. And he obviously wore some gold over in WCW, but never World Heavyweight Champion. Ultimate Warrior. A lot of documentaries have come out about the Ultimate Warrior. God rest his soul as well. A lot of people said that once Warrior eventually lost the WWF Championship or WWE Championship, his career kind of went downhill. And honestly, it did. He obviously had that humongous big moment at WrestleMania against Hogan where it was title versus title, which is a dream matchup at that time. Both guys were on top of their game, and the fan base was strong for both Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. But that was like his big signature matchup. Obviously, the run in WCW really didn't mean a damn thing. Eric Bischoff and his creative team really didn't know what to do with Ultimate Warrior. He had that one good match, if you want to call it that, against Hogan when Hogan was in the NWO for WCW. I believe it was Halloween Havoc, if I'm not mistaken. But that was like his last big match, in my honest opinion, man. And it's a damn shame because Ultimate Warrior was a good wrestler, man. And obviously the gimmick was definitely over with the fans. The fans loved Ultimate Warrior. They really did. But hats off to Ultimate Warrior for getting a win in this matchup and at that time retaining the WWE World Championship. Now, as far as SummerSlam 1990, I always give these pay-per-views a rating from 1 out of 10. I'm going to give this one a solid 7, man. I think some of the matches on here were really not that bad. The main event, Rick Rude, Ultimate Warrior, was not bad. Earthquake versus Hogan was a really good matchup. It really was. So that's the reason why I had to give this a 7, man, because the way they booked SummerSlam 1990 was not that bad at all. So I'm going to have to give it a 7, maybe a 7.5 at best. But this is my review of SummerSlam 1990. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.